So my dear friends, the Baltic Dry Index, when Bunkernet called me, was at $569, which was the lowest ever recorded since 1986. So I was inspired to come up with the title that non-brilliant times call for brilliant people. And if there was a subtitle to this speech, it would have been, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. The good news is that, slightly good news, an hour ago when I checked the Baltic Dry Index, it was at 575. And according to the guru of our industry, Dr. Martin Stopford, in a recent article of his in Shipping and Finance of Clarkson's, he said that although times are not brilliant today, it doesn't feel that miserable compared to 1986. In this speech, I will have two key messages. The first key message is that the world is a much different place than what it used to be in the past. And the second message is, what do we do to remain in business, to be competitive, and to be successful in a world that is a much different place than it used to be in the past, and how do we do it? So allow me to take you back, starting by key point number one, in memory lane, 35 years back. And let's go back to the 1980s. It was the time of the deregulation of the capital markets, when Ronald Reagan came to power in the US in 1981, when Margaret Thatcher came to power in the UK in 1979, and the two political allies and friends, as they were called, soulmates as they were called, were responsible, in Reagan's case, for the deregulation policies, and in Margaret Thatcher's case, for her privatization policies, which shifted the economic power from the government to the private hands. It was amongst the first times we witnessed the free flow of capital moving from one country to the other, and it was at that time that terms like the Golden Boys, Yuppies, and the Wolf of Wall Street were coined. And then came the 90s, when we witnessed the gradual shift of the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector moved from Western Europe and the USA into China and the tiger economies. Tiger referring as an analogy for the economies we had a huge spur of growth, usually accompanied by a higher standard of living. Countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Indonesia, China. And it was at that time that we witnessed in Europe many of our factories and in the US closing down or moving to China and the tiger economies. And then the last decade, the 2000s, when we watched the economic power shifting from Europe and the US into China and the developing countries like India and Brazil. These three systemic changes have not only altered the world, but they have also changed our industry. And there are another three changes that I'm seeing now. First of all, I'm seeing the trade blocs like EU and NAFTA, the way business is conducted, mainly online and by cutting out of the middleman, and the new emerging markets like China, Brazil, and India, all of which, my dear friends, its extrapolations and implementations make it very hard to predict the future by looking back in the past, to the past. And in my opinion, there are another two changes that are happening now, and they will continue to be happening in the next 10 to 20 years, two systemic changes. And one is that China is moving from being the world's factory into a world's-based consumer economy. In layman's terms, the lion's share of what will be produced in China will be consumed in China, as we heard from our first speaker previously. And the second thing, my dear friends, is the advent of the 3D technology. And even though this might be heard as a bit far-stretched, I would urge you to think back 15 to 20 years ago when you first had your first mobile device. It was probably a Nokia device the size of our battery. And even though now you'll think, will companies be producing and individuals in-house their major needs? Perhaps, my dear friends, yes, they will be producing their major needs in-house. So the question is, what do we do? How do we do it? As Tom Peters, the guru of management, once said, we cannot rely on past practices and past business models going into the future. And I am seeing that change is inevitable, and if I can coin a term from our industry, is that change is like a wave which is about to hit the shore. You can either let it sweep you off your feet, or you can attack it head on. And the way we attack the wave head on, the three ways that we can attack it, is key point number 2. And I will start with the first and most important way, is that we should keep our antennas extended not only inside our industry, but also outside our industry. Because we live in a global world where one systemic change in one industry will influence our industry in the medium to long term. And think about the filofax and how it has been replaced by our mobile device, except for my friend Petros Siakas, who's still using a filofax. Think of the candle and how it was replaced by electricity. Think of horses and how they're replaced by cars. Think of the middlemen and how they were cut out of the equation by suppliers who are going directly to the end user via e-shops. Think of taxi drivers that commanded a great position in some of their countries that are being replaced by an application called Uber. Think of newspapers that are becoming obsolete because of the internet. So the only common denominator in all of this is that the change in those industries have come from outside the industry. So anyone here looking inside the industry to find answers might miss the change. And this leads me to point number 2, which is that we should become more strategic in our hiring processes. We should employ a pool of talent that is diverse, with various expertise from different industries. We cannot keep saying the same axiom, we are in the shipping industry, because we're in the global business industry. And very recently, we're lucky that IBM, the global giant in the computer industry, came up with its recent survey, which they went across 1,707 CEOs from around the globe, C-level executives, mainly CEOs, and they asked them various questions. One of the questions was, what are the 4 characteristics that each person should bring with them on a daily basis to work in order to be more valuable to their company and to make their company more valuable? And the 4 characteristics, my dear friends, were, in position number 1 with 75%, to be more collaborative. In position number 2 with 65%, to be more communicative. In position number 3 and position number 4 with 60% is to be more creative and to be more flexible. Let me explain each one very briefly. To be more collaborative means that number 1 is too small a number to achieve greatness. As the acronym TEAM stands for, together, everyone achieves more. A global customer of mine recently visited Frankfurt in one of the exhibitions, furniture exhibitions, where they were exhibiting the new collaborative offices, which serve 2 main purposes. First, people need to work together in order to service the most demanding and the most knowledgeable customer of all times. And secondly, teams like Bunkernet need to work together as a cohesive unit in order to bring better results to the market and to their profitability. The second thing is that people need to be communicative, because everyone communicates, but very few people connect. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in that proportion. Listen twice so we can understand trends, so we can understand changes, systemic changes that will influence and impact our industry, and then talk once. Being here makes you very successful, because the difference between successful and unsuccessful people, as a recent survey that I've done showed, is that successful people show up in events like this one, because they understand that one idea or one new acquaintance can change their personal and professional lives. The third thing is being creative. And by creative, I don't mean to become the Da Vinci of your industry. By creative, I want to refer back to somebody who's not with us on this world anymore, the late Charlie Tremendous Jones, who said in his book, Life is Tremendous, that you are the same person today that you will be in 5 years' time for today, except for 2 things: the books you read and the people you meet. You are the same person today that you will be in 5 years' time for today, except for 2 things: the books you read and the people you meet. The books you read because life is too short to learn only from your mistakes and from your successes. So listening to the gurus of your industry, reading the gurus of your industry, and looking outside also your industry makes you more creative. And the people you meet, because if I have €1 and you have €1, sir, and we exchange it, we both end up having €1. But if I have one idea and you have one idea and we exchange it, we both end up having 2 ideas each. And this leads us to the final step in the IBM survey, which is being flexible. And by flexible, I mean you should understand that today you might be working in Limassol, tomorrow in Lisbon, the other day in London, and the next day you might be unemployed. So it's imperative that you hone your skills. It's imperative that you understand more than your industry. It's imperative that you keep your antennas looking inside your industry and outside your industry. And this leads us to our third point of the second key point, which is to embrace change rather than let it sweep us off our feet. And how do we embrace change? The best example I can think of to explain it is when I was fortunate enough to have been in London, in the Leaders in London event in 2008, where people like Rudolph Giuliani, the ex-mayor of New York, spoke, Daniel Coleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence, Jack Welch, the CEO, the ex-CEO of General Electric, and many others like Mohamed Yunus, Garry Kasparov, the chess sensation. But there was one woman that really struck a chord with me, and that was Carly Fiorina. And Carly was the previous head of Hewlett-Packard and the first woman to be amongst the 20 Fortune companies as head of the Hewlett-Packard team. And when she came up, she talked about bullfighting, and she referred to one word, and that word was coherencia. And she said that coherencia is a position that the bull takes when it feels defeated from the bullfighter. And although it's an attacking position, the bullfighter knows exactly at that time that the bull has been defeated. And even though the bull is in a comfort zone, it's exactly the opposite, because the bullfighter knows that the bull has given up. And in many cases, my dear friends, we remain in comfort zones, like the bull. We remain in coherencia positions. So what I'm asking you to do is that, because many people oftentimes know a lot about their job, a lot about their profession, and a lot about their industry, and they work, live, and dream within silos, which makes them very good at what they do, but very bad in spotting change. So in concluding, I would urge each and every one of you to keep your antennas extended, not only inside your industry, but also outside your industry, to spot the systemic changes. To be adaptable and to be flexible in your approach. Because if you are not, then you will not be attacking the wave head on. You will be letting the wave sweep you off your feet. And last but not least, become more strategic in your hiring processes. Hire people who are open-minded, collaborative, communicative, creative, and flexible. Because if you do that, my dear friends, then we will come to what Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, once said: you're as good as the people you hire. And during these non-brilliant times, we need to hire brilliant people. Because as the African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with others. Thank you very much.